The stench of burning oil filled the crisp evening air as I wiped my hands on an old rag, standing outside my small, dimly lit auto repair shop. The streets were mostly empty, the hum of distant traffic a faint reminder that the city never truly slept. Then, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom crawled to a stop right in front of my shop, steam rising from the hood like a wounded beast. I frowned. A Phantom? Here? Luxury cars like that never found their way to this part of town. They belonged to the rich, the untouchable elite who wouldn't be caught dead in a neighborhood where even the streetlights flickered with uncertainty. I sighed, wiping the sweat off my forehead as the car door opened, revealing a woman. She stepped out, her presence striking, not in an obvious, flashy way, but in a way that commanded attention. Dark sunglasses, a fitted designer suit, and an aura that screamed power. Need help? I called out, stepping forward. She turned toward me, hesitating before removing her sunglasses. Her emerald green eyes locked onto mine, studying me with an unreadable expression. My car, it's overheating, she said, her voice smooth but laced with frustration. I was heading home when it just stopped. I nodded, already moving toward the hood. Rich people and their machines. They had the money, but no patience. Pop the hood, I said. She hesitated for a second, then obliged. As I leaned in, the heat hit me like a furnace. Coolant leak. A bad one. The engine was close to frying itself. Bad luck, I muttered. You're not driving this home tonight. Her expression darkened. That's not an option. I exhaled sharply. Look, I can fix it, but it's not going to be a 10-minute job. She glanced at her watch, sighed, and finally nodded. How long? An hour. Maybe 2 if I hit a snag. She crossed her arms, considering. Then, with a reluctant nod, she stepped back. Fine, just do it. I gotta work, my hands moving instinctively, the familiar rhythm of repairing something broken easing into my bones. She stayed close, watching silently. For some reason, I felt the weight of her gaze on me. But I didn't ask. After nearly 2 hours of nonstop work, I finally wiped my greasy hands on my worn-out coveralls and straightened. All done, I said, slamming the hood shut. She'll run smoothly now, but you should get a full checkup soon. She raised an eyebrow, looking between me and the car. That's it. I nodded. She pulled out her wallet and handed me a stack of crisp bills. Way more than the repair was worth. I don't take extra, I said, pushing it back toward her. She tilted her head. I just gave you triple the amount. No mechanic would turn that down. I'm not no mechanic. I charge for the work I do, not for how rich my customer looks. Her lips parted slightly, almost like she wanted to argue. Then, to my surprise, she smirked. Honest and hard-working, she murmured. That's rare. I shrugged, grabbing my toolbox. Not really. She didn't say anything after that, just tucked the bills away, got in her car, and disappeared down the street, leaving me standing there, completely unaware that this one encounter had just rewritten my entire fate. The next morning, I was under a rusted-out sedan when my phone rang. I nearly ignored it. Work came first, but something made me reach for it. Hello. A calm, authoritative voice came through the line. Is this Liam Carter? I wiped my brow. Yeah. Who's asking? This is Daniels and Associates. Our client was impressed with your work last night and would like to discuss a business opportunity with you. Can you come to Holloway Tower at noon? I frowned. Holloway Tower. That was billionaire territory, not a place for a guy like me. Look, I think you've got the wrong. She specifically asked for you, Mr. Carter. That made me pause. She? The woman from last night. My gut twisted. What was this about? Something told me that refusing wasn't an option. So, against every logical instinct, I wiped the grease off my hands, grabbed my jacket, and made my way toward a meeting that would change my life forever. I stood in front of Holloway Tower, staring up at its gleaming glass exterior that stretched so high it seemed to pierce the sky itself. The air here felt different, clean, crisp, laced with a kind of wealth I had never known. This wasn't my world. It never had been. My boots, still covered in dust and grease, felt out of place against the polished marble floors as I stepped inside. The lobby was massive, filled with pristine white decor and gold accents, the kind of luxury that screamed power. A sharply dressed receptionist barely glanced at me before saying, Mr. Carter, they're expecting you. Take the private elevator to the 52nd floor. I hesitated. They knew my name. Pushing down my unease, I stepped into the elevator, watching the numbers climb higher and higher. With each passing floor, the air felt thicker, heavier, as if I were ascending into a world I had no right to be in. When the doors finally slid open, I was greeted by floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the entire city. And there, standing by a sleek glass desk, was her, Evelyn Holloway. She wasn't in the stiff business suit from last night. Now, she wore something simpler, a fitted black blouse, sleeves rolled up, paired with high-waisted pants. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, making her look less like a billionaire and more like someone who had just finished a hard day's work. But those emerald eyes still held that same piercing intensity. "Liam," she said, as if we were old acquaintances. "Have a seat." I walked in cautiously, lowering myself into the leather chair across from her. "You're probably wondering why you're here," she continued, crossing her arms. "No kidding," I muttered. She smirked at that. Then, she slid a thin folder across the desk. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a contract, and, at the bottom, next to my name, was a figure so large my brain nearly short-circuited. 6 figures. For a mechanic job. I exhaled sharply. This can't be right. "I don't make mistakes," Evelyn said smoothly. I shook my head, pushing the folder back toward her. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she countered. "I know you're one of the best at what you do. And I know you didn't take extra money from me last night when you easily could have." I swallowed. "That still doesn't explain why you're offering me this." Her gaze flickered, a moment of hesitation, then something softer. "I need someone I can trust," she admitted. I frowned. "For what?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly. "There's a garage I own, a private one. It's where I keep my collection." "Collection?" "I need a personal mechanic. Someone who won't screw me over. Someone with skill, integrity, and," she tilted her head, "someone who doesn't get intimidated easily." My throat felt dry. This wasn't just about fixing cars. There was something else going on here. "What's the catch?" I asked. Her lips curled into the faintest smirk. "The catch? You work for me. No questions asked. You fix what needs fixing, keep everything confidential, and in return, you make more money than you've ever seen." Silence stretched between us. It was a golden opportunity, something I could never dream of in 1,000 lifetimes. But it felt dangerous. I wasn't sure if I was stepping into a job or a trap. I paced in my tiny apartment that night, the contract sitting on my kitchen counter like it had a pulse of its own. This was insane. I was a mechanic in a rundown shop, barely scraping by. And now, a billionaire was offering me more money than I had ever seen for a job that didn't make sense. It was too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But there was one thing I couldn't shake, the way Evelyn had looked at me. Like she had already decided I was the right person. Like she needed me. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration burning in my chest. I didn't belong in that world. I wasn't cut out for fancy skyscrapers, secret garages, and private billionaires. And yet, I picked up the contract, staring at the signature line. What if this was my shot? What if this was my one chance to break free from the life that had been dragging me down for years? Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed a pen, and I signed. The next morning, I walked in a Holloway Tower again, but this time I wasn't a visitor. I was an employee. A man in a black suit, tall, built like a linebacker, escorted me down a long hallway to an underground parking level. But this wasn't just any garage. This was something else entirely. The walls were lined with luxury cars I had only ever seen in magazines. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, vintage Mustangs, a Bugatti that probably cost more than my entire town. And in the center of it all, leaning against a pristine white Aston Martin, was Evelyn. She looked up, meeting my gaze with something almost amused. "Welcome to my world, Carter," she said. I swallowed hard, looking around. What the hell had I just signed up for? My fingers twitched at my sides as I took in the sheer opulence surrounding me. Ferraris, McLarens, Bugattis. Each vehicle was a masterpiece, gleaming under the pristine LED lighting. The air smelled like premium leather and high-octane fuel, a stark contrast to the grease-stained scent of my old shop. This wasn't just a garage. This was a temple to machines worth millions. Evelyn stood next to the Aston Martin, her arms crossed as she studied me. You look surprised, she mused. I exhaled slowly. I knew you were rich, but this is next level. Her lips twitched in amusement. I take my hobbies seriously. Hobbies? Owning a collection like this wasn't a hobby. It was a statement. I walked deeper into the garage, my boots echoing against the polished concrete. Every single car here was in immaculate condition. No dust, no scratches, nothing out of place. Whoever maintained them before me had done an obsessive job. But then I noticed something strange. Among the fleet of flawless supercars was one car covered in a tarp. It was set apart, pushed toward the back, away from the others. Unlike the showroom-level perfection around it, this car was different. I turned back to Evelyn, tilting my head toward it. What's that one? Her expression changed. For a split second, something flickered in her eyes, something unguarded. But then it was gone, replaced by her usual cool demeanor. It doesn't concern you, she said simply. I hesitated. There was something personal about that car. But I didn't push. Not yet. Instead, I folded my arms. So, what exactly am I here to do? Evelyn raised a brow. Fix cars. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah, I got that part. But why me? You could hire any high-end mechanic in the world. Hell, some of these cars probably have their own personal maintenance crews. She sighed, stepping closer. I told you. I need someone I can trust. I narrow my eyes. Trust for what exactly? She held my gaze for a long moment before finally saying, for things I can't tell you yet. Red flag. Huge red flag. But before I could question her further, she turned on her heel and started walking toward a sleek black Porsche 911 Turbo. Start with this one, she instructed. It needs some tuning. I clenched my jaw. Answers could wait. For now, I had a job to do. I popped open the Porsche's hood, letting my hands do what they did best. The longer I worked, the more I noticed something strange. Whoever had been maintaining these cars before me wasn't just an expert. They were borderline obsessed. The tuning was so precise, it was almost unnecessary. Every engine was practically flawless, down to the last bolt. Yet here I was being hired to what? Do minor touch-ups? Something didn't add up. As I tightened a screw under the hood, I felt eyes on me. Not Evelyn's. Someone else's. I slowly straightened, scanning the garage. There, near the entrance, stood a man in a sharp navy suit. Late 40s, silver at his temples, the kind of guy who looked like he had people killed for fun. His hands were clasped behind his back, his expression blank, but his eyes? Cold, calculating, watching me like a threat. Evelyn, who had been checking her phone, noticed the shift in the air. Her head snapped up, her entire posture stiffening the moment she saw the man. Liam, take a break, she said, her voice calm, but too calm. I hesitated. I'm not done with the now. I shut the hood without another word. Something was wrong. Evelyn walked past me, approaching the man with slow, deliberate steps. You're early, she said. The man's lips curled slightly. And you're being reckless. Their conversation dropped to a whisper, but I caught fragments. A mechanic? None of your business. You're making mistakes, Evelyn. I clenched my jaw. I was definitely not supposed to hear any of this. Before I could make sense of it, the man turned and walked out without another word. Evelyn let out a slow breath, pressing her fingers against her temples like she was fighting a headache. I took a step toward her. Okay, what the hell was that? She looked at me, really looked at me, and then she did something I hadn't expected. She said, I need your help, Liam. Not as a mechanic. As something more. Help with what? I asked, my voice steady despite the unease curling in my stomach. Evelyn ran a hand through her hair. That man, his name is Victor Holloway. My uncle. He doesn't think I should be running the family business. He thinks I should be controlled. I frowned. So he's what? Some kind of corporate enforcer. Her jaw tightened. More like a leech who wants everything my father left behind. I exhaled. And what does this have to do with me? She hesitated. Then, my father had a rule. Whoever controls the garage controls the company. It's symbolic, sure, but it's a tradition in my family. My uncle is trying to take everything from me. But as long as I keep the garage intact, he can't legally push me out. I processed that. So, you hired me because you need someone in your corner. Her lips pressed together. Yes. I let out a low chuckle. You should have just said that instead of throwing six figures at me. Her eyes darkened. I don't like owing people. I pay for loyalty. Silence stretched between us. Then I said, I don't work for money, Evelyn. I work for trust. Something in her expression shifted, and for the first time since meeting her, she looked at me not as a billionaire, but as a person. Then I hope I don't regret trusting you, she murmured. I met her gaze, steel for steel. You won't. I stood there, absorbing everything Evelyn had just told me. A battle for control, a family legacy, a power-hungry uncle willing to do anything to take what wasn't his. And somehow, I had just walked into the middle of it. I should have walked away. I should have said no. But something about the way Evelyn looked at me, like she was standing on the edge of a battlefield, prepared to fight, but knowing she couldn't do it alone, made me plant my feet instead of turning around. So, I said slowly, crossing my arms, "What happens next?" She studied me for a long moment, then exhaled. "Victor's going to come after this place. He's going to try to destroy my credibility, cut off my support, and make sure I fail." I nodded. "Then we don't let him." Evelyn's lips twitched slightly, the hint of a smirk. "You talk like you've fought a war before." I shrugged. "I fought to survive my whole life. What's one more fight?" She held my gaze for a beat longer, something unreadable passing through her expression. Then she nodded. "Let's get to work." The next morning, I walked into the garage early. Evelyn had told me she had some meetings to handle, which left me alone with my new job. Except when I opened the garage doors, my gut twisted instantly. The place had been trashed. Not destroyed, but messed with. Tools missing. Engine parts scattered. One of the cars, a Lamborghini Aventador, had its tires slashed. And on the wall, in bright red paint, were 2 words. "Walk away." My fists clenched. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly who was behind this. Victor. He was making it clear that I wasn't welcome. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to think. This wasn't just vandalism. This was a warning. And if there was one thing I didn't do, it was back down from challenge. I grabbed a wrench, started cleaning up, and called Evelyn. "Your uncle plays dirty," I said as soon as she picked up. There was a pause. Then, her voice, calm, but dangerous. "What did he do?" I told her. Silence stretched between us before she finally said, "I'm on my way." Good. Because this wasn't just about cars anymore. This was about war. Evelyn arrived 20 minutes later. She didn't say anything at first. Just took one look at the mess, at the spray-painted thread on the wall, and her expression went cold. Then she turned to me. "We fix it." I raised a brow. "That's it." Her jaw tightened. "I won't play his game. He wants a reaction. He won't get one." I exhaled, nodding. "All right. But if he does this again, he won't." Something about the way she said it, the sharp finality in her tone, made me believe her. I didn't ask what she was planning. I just grabbed my tools and got to work. By the time we had everything back in order, the sun had already set. Evelyn had left for another meeting, which meant I was alone in the garage when I heard it. A sound. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I grabbed a wrench and moved toward the entrance. That's when I saw him. A man, early 40s, dressed in all black, standing just outside the garage doors. Watching me. "Can I help you?" I called out. The man smirked, just admiring the place. Something about him set me on edge. His voice was too smooth, his stance too relaxed, like he didn't have a care in the world. But his eyes? Cold, calculating, dangerous. "You work for Holloway?" I asked. He chuckled. "Which one?" That told me everything I needed to know. He worked for Victor. "You can tell your boss the message was received," I said, gripping the wrench tighter. The man tilted his head. "You don't seem like the type to back down." "I'm not." He smiled. It wasn't friendly. "Then I guess we'll be seeing each other again." And just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I stood there, wrench still in hand, my pulse pounding. This wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, Evelyn arrived before sunrise. She didn't look like she had slept. "Liam," she said the moment she saw me, "tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the man in black, about his warning, about how he wasn't just some hired thug. He was someone important. Evelyn listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she sat down on the edge of one of the workbenches and sighed. "I should have warned you," she admitted. I folded my arms. "Yeah, you should have." She ran a hand through her hair. "Victor doesn't just want control. He wants complete dominance. And he'll use any means necessary to get it." I studied her. "You've dealt with people like that before." Her expression darkened. "I grew up with them." I exhaled. So what now? She looked up at me. Now, she repeated. Her green eyes hardened. Now we fight back. Evelyn wasted no time. She called in a favor, and within hours, the garage was under full surveillance. Hidden cameras, motion detectors, everything. Let's see if Victor enjoys being watched for a change, she muttered. But she wasn't done. She also made one phone call to a contact I didn't recognize. When she hung up, she turned to me. Pack a bag, she said. I frowned. Why? Because tonight, we're making the first move. That night, Evelyn and I drove out of the city, heading toward an address she had yet to explain. The tension inside the car was thick, neither of us speaking much. I had packed a bag like she told me to, but I still had no clue what we were about to do. Finally, I broke the silence. Are we going to talk about this plan of yours? Or am I just going in blind? Evelyn glanced at me from the driver's seat, her green eyes glinting in the dim light of the dashboard. We're going to meet someone who hates Victor just as much as I do, she said simply. That didn't sit right with me. Who? She exhaled. His former right-hand man. My grip on the armrest tightened. You mean the same kind of guy who showed up at the garage last night? She nodded. His name is Daniel Cross. He used to be one of Victor's top enforcers, until Victor double-crossed him. Now he wants revenge, and we're going to give him a reason to help us. This was getting deeper than I had expected. Dirtier. More dangerous. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Let's do it. We met Daniel Cross at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his jaw. The kind of man who had been through hell and walked out the other side. His eyes flicked between me and Evelyn, sharp and assessing. So, he said, voice rough, you finally decided to fight back, princess. Evelyn didn't even flinch at the nickname. I don't have a choice. Daniel chuckled darkly. No, you don't. Then he turned to me. And who the hell is this? I met his stare without backing down. Liam Carter. Mechanic. His brow lifted. A mechanic? You bringing in street guys now? Evelyn's voice was steel. He's more than that. Daniel studied me a moment longer, then nodded. All right, let's talk. We spent the next hour going over Victor's operations, his weak spots, his allies, and his enemies. Daniel had information that Evelyn didn't, and it painted a picture that was far worse than she thought. Victor isn't just playing business games, Daniel said. He's got people in his pocket. Politicians, cops, and a few very dangerous men. If you're going after him, you'd better be ready for war. Evelyn didn't hesitate. I am. I exhaled. So was I. Over the next few days, we put our plan into motion. We leaked false information, made it look like Evelyn was selling off her assets. If Victor thought she was weak, he'd make his move. We reinforced security at the garage. No more sabotage. No more threats we weren't prepared for. And we dug into Victor's finances. That's when we found something interesting. He had offshore accounts, money being funneled through shell companies. Money that wasn't exactly legal. Gotcha, Evelyn murmured, a wicked smirk on her lips. Now, we had leverage. Victor fell for the trap. We knew he would. The night he made his move, we were waiting. I was in the garage, pretending to work late. Evelyn was in her office upstairs. And then, they came. 3 black SUVs. Armed men stepping out, moving toward the building. But before they could reach the door, floodlights burst on. Daniel and his people surrounded them. And then Evelyn stepped out. Going somewhere, uncle, she said coolly. Victor's face twisted in rage. You little. Careful. Evelyn cut him off. You're in enough trouble already. Then she tossed a file at his feet. The proof of his offshore accounts. His fraud. His crimes. Victor's face went pale. You lose, she said simply. And just like that, his empire crumbled. A week later, it was over. Victor was gone. Arrested. His influence shattered. Evelyn had won. And as I stood in the garage, fixing up one of her cars like nothing had changed, I realized everything had. Evelyn walked up beside me, watching me work. So, she said, are you sticking around? I looked at her, at this fierce, brilliant woman who had fought tooth and nail for everything she had. And I grinned. Yeah, I said, I think I am. She smirked. And just like that, I realized I hadn't just fixed cars. I had built something new, a life worth staying for.